Welcome back to part 2 of A Beginner's Guide to Making Sculpture with Light a Fire Studio.
Welcome back to the barn, everybody. And thanks for coming back to see part 2 of our 3-part How to Make a Sculpture video. In this episode, we're going to cover implementation and fabrication. I'm also going to talk about some process-oriented artists that have inspired me throughout the years. And we're finally going to put this thing together. So stay tuned.
Let's talk about some material. Like, how do you decide what material you want for the sculpture you're trying to make? First up, let's dig deep in the archive of human experience: stone, clay, and wood. Some of the earliest forms of sculpture that still exist today were made in stone. It's a versatile material that can be easily manipulated and displayed indoors and outdoors. It's been around as long as dirt. Speaking of dirt, clay. Another of humankind's most ancient creative materials, clay is incredibly versatile and can be hand-formed, molded, cast, and now even 3D printed. One of my all-time favorites and one of the most abundant, easy to work with materials on Earth, wood has played a major role in the human experience since humans could use tools. It's a great introductory material, and you can carve a sculpture in a day if you want. This brings us to metals. Early metals, precious metals, gold, copper, bronze, modern allies like iron, steel, aluminum, and of course now, rare earths and space-age material. Some of the earliest metals used for sculpture making include gold, silver, copper, and later alloys such as bronze, all still used today. Although expensive materials, they can make gorgeous works of art that will stand the test of time. The Industrial Revolution brought a new age to sculpture making. Metals such as iron, steel, and more recently aluminum have revolutionized the scale and scope of the human and sculptural world. Modern metals are probably my favorite material. Though they do present some costly startup challenges, if you choose to work in these materials, there is really no limit to your creative possibilities. Love it or hate it, the future always comes. In the art world, it's an ever-changing environment. People are working with AI daily. 3D printing capabilities have become so common, you can generate a finished artwork from your computer in a few hours. Who knows what new materials will appear? Ultimately, I chose steel for this project because I knew I wanted it to be outdoors, and steel is very versatile. You can keep it or rust it, or it's just, the possibilities are endless. And honestly, it looks great in any season.
I was starting to have my doubts as to whether this could actually exist in a three-dimensional space. So I went back to my first sort of halfway model. And I made up this quick maquette of what I thought the frame should look like.
Feeling more confident that this would work based on the crude model, I was ready to commit to the larger sculpture. We had our templates, so I transferred the largest section to wood and cut it out. But after making the metal copy, I decided it really wasn't necessary to do them all in wood. So I reinforced the cardboard, and after selecting the preferred metal thickness, it was just a matter of making all my cuts. This next step was going to be very much like making the crude model as before from the smaller template. I would have to pick the round bar that I wanted for the frame and then just hand bend it into the shape of every single panel. Once I had all the rebar cut to the size I needed and bent in the shape I wanted, I decided to put it together with the TIG welder. Because TIG welding gives you a very fine, clean, finished surface. And it's kind of just like soldering. So put as much metal in as you need to and you should be good to go. Here again, just showing you some quick TIG shots. It makes a really nice weld. So hopefully in the end you don't have to do a lot of cleanup before you try to put the panels on.
So all of this is really about process. And in that regard, let's look at some process-oriented artists that have inspired me throughout the years.
First up, Andy Goldsworthy. He was born in England, but now resides in Scotland, and has been making art directly related to his environment, both rural and urban. For over 25 years, Goldsworthy has made an important reputation for both his ephemeral artworks, which is a fancy way of saying short-lived or temporary, but he's also known for more permanent installations that draw out the unique character of the places they exist. Goldsworthy works with the natural materials such as leaves, mud, ice, and stones that he takes directly from the landscape. If you're not familiar with his works, I strongly suggest you acquaint yourself with his long list of amazing works and films. Next up, Augusta Savage. She started modeling figures from the red clay soil of her native Florida at an early age. She had her first artistic success in West Palm Beach, receiving local notice and prizes. She moved to Jacksonville, Florida, hoping to make a living by executing commissioned busts of the city's well-to-do African Americans. She moved to New York City in 1921 and enrolled at the Cooper Union. Her instructors quickly waived many of the classes because of her talent, and she graduated in 3 years. During the Great Depression, art sales came to a halt, so she began to teach art, founding the Savage Studio of Arts and Crafts in Harlem in 1932. She was a major figure in the Harlem Renaissance. She had an immense talent for capturing the human spirit and had a very unique personal style. In the late 30s, she was commissioned to create a sculpture for the 1939 New York World's Fair. The piece, titled The Harp, and many of her other notable works were never cast in durable materials and were later lost or destroyed. Sai Guo-Shang, the Chinese-born artist, is known for his pyrotechnical installations and for using gunpowder as a medium. To try and describe his very storied career would be impossible, as his works have been carried out and installed all over the world. He was even notably the pyrotechnic choreographer for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. All I can say is, check out his amazing documentary Skyladder on Netflix, as it might even challenge your opinion of what art is capable of being, as his work has done for me. Next, Kathe Kollwits. The German graphic artist and sculptor was an articulate advocate for victims of social injustice, war, and inhumanity. She survived decades of war in Europe and documented the tragedy of being human throughout this period in history. She was a very noted artist and teacher in her own time. Her work is as beautiful as it is haunting, and her stylistic treatment of her materials makes her one of my favorite artists of all time. Sadly, her studio was bombed during World War II, depriving the world of much of her portfolio, and just as woefully, she passed away before the end of the war in Europe. Kollwits was the last great German expressionist, and is often noted to be one of the foremost artists of social protest in the 20th century. Finally, Robert Smithson, the American sculptor and writer associated with the land art movement, made large-scale sculptures called earthworks. Like Goldsworthy, he worked directly with nature, often creating and constructing with huge amounts of soil and rocks. Notably, as seen here, is his major work Spiral Jetty, installed in the Great Salt Lake in Utah. It can still be seen and visited today. In this and all of his earthworks, Smithson was creating geologic time through scale and the use of his materials. He was motivated by ancient sites like Stonehenge in England, and felt that his work was directly associated with these human endeavors. Now, on with our show. There it is, folks. I'm still wondering what to call this piece. We'll save that for episode 3. But, yeah, now it's time to put it all together. What we're going to be doing today is we got all our pieces cut. We've still got a little bit of cleanup to do to make sure it all fits together, but we're ready to start putting panels on this piece. So we got our base here, and it's a fairly decent, it's a bit thicker than the walls and everything else we're going to use. And what we need to do is attach a couple of these guys so we can put a threaded rod when it's ready to be mounted, wherever it's ready to be mounted. We're going to put a couple of bolts and weld them to the plate, and then that plate will be on the inside like this, and that bolt will be welded on here, so you can just take your threaded rod and mount the sculpture in place. And in that regard, most of these bolts, depending on which ones you buy from the hardware store, they come coated in some sort of galvanized to keep them from rusting. So what we need to do in order to get a nice tight weld on this stuff is we just need to grind some of that off. So when we attach, first of all, we ground off the washer as well. Our other guy, which we haven't cleaned up yet, you can see the difference. See how shiny that guy is? And we're going to double up just to make sure. And what that washer is going to do when this is on the inside of the sculpture, that washer is going to make sure it doesn't wobble over time. And it'll just give it a little extra strength. So we're going to add 2 of these. And yes, you can buy this pre-made, but you know, I got all this extra hardware sitting around, so I don't mind making some stuff. So we're going to weld all this together, weld that nut to that washer, and then we're going to weld all this to our plate. I decided to go ahead and use the TIG again because it gives you a really nice clean finish and you don't really have to do a lot of cleanup. And I certainly can use the lift TIG practice. So here's just another nice close-up TIG shot. But you know what? I wasn't 100% happy with the results I was getting, so I decided to switch things up. Yeah, we should have been there the whole time. I think the short circuit was a much better idea. TIG welding was not going well. So we got the bolt all tacked up. And now we're just gonna put it on the base. Gloves would be smart. Man, it's throwing some sparks today. Watch your pants, pretty boy.
let slide on 90.
And now it's time to come in here and attach our base plate to our wire frame. We're going to tack everything up. See, I've got it clamped to the table there, real nice and flat. We put a bunch of tacks and then we'll run beads on the whole inside and the whole outside.
Rolling up there with the cameraman.
As far as weak points and stressors, this part of the sculpture will probably be the most exposed to the elements. So it's crucial that we try to remove pinholes or any places that water could seep in over time.
I like it.
Well, I think we're ready to start putting this thing together. And everything's really starting to fit together really nice. All I did was come in here and flatten these welds out. It gives me like really nice sharp corners. And it's gonna give us a really nice curve. The long piece that sets up this side, and it runs the length of the entire sculpture, should be our first piece, because I think that's gonna set the precedent for everything else. So what I'm gonna do, just try to set it into place, and I'm just gonna come in and put some teeny little tacks all the way up the edge here. And at the top, put it all together. And we'll be on our way. Looks pretty good. Pretty manageable.
It's not exactly the easiest thing getting a flat panel onto a curved and thin wire frame. So just do your best, and you can always work things out in the details later on. Real quick, I forgot to mention, you want to get as much rust off of here as you can. Since we're gas MIG welding, it is kind of crucial that you have a nice clean metal surface. Plus, the tacks we made on the first panel, we need to get those out of the way so the next panel will sit nice and flat. Here's panel number 2, and again, use your clamps, use your grips, use whatever tools you've got at your disposal, a piece of wood, a chuck, whatever it takes. Just get it into place and tack that next panel on. At this point, it's basically like doing auto body work. And here we go, panel number 3. You got to do anything you can to get that into place. And if you'll notice on my clamps, I have little pieces of protective metal so I don't actually dent the metal panel itself.
One eternity later.
Wow, guys, it's finally starting to look like a finished sculpture. I went ahead and put that top panel on off screen, and boy, look at the curves we're getting. I like all these edges, the points. It's really coming together. But before we put on this last panel, because we won't be able to do any more work inside, you can see I put the threaded rod back into place, and I coated this whole foot plate in a high temperature grease. So long after I've finished welding everything up, if water does get in there, hopefully it'll evaporate before things start to rust.
After we tacked all the panels on, it was time to just come back in and weld every single seam. And that's a pretty long, difficult process, so I spared you most of that. But I'll just show you what we've been doing. You just go along here and you fill in each little section until it's all nice and filled in. Here's the last spot that we haven't welded yet. We're just gonna weld over these gaps into the original tacks, fill it in, and that'll be it. Then it's gonna be on to finishing. We'll have to grind all these welds off, and then we'll decide what we want the final surface to look like. Hey, it's been a long, tedious process, but these will be the last welds we hopefully have to do on this piece. So thanks for watching part 2, and we'll see you on part 3.
You might ask yourself, why not just weld it all in one shot? But honestly, if you try and do it all at once, you're going to warp those panels and cause an oil can effect. Well, that does it for implementation and fabrication in part 2. We got a little excited and started to clean this thing up. And hey, come back for part 3 when we'll discuss finishing and knowing when to quit. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.
Are you still here? Well, I'm glad you are, and thanks for watching our sculpture series. I forgot to mention that all the welds for this series were made with the Yes Welder 205 DSB, and we'd like to give a big shout out to Yes Welder for sponsoring this with their welder. It's a great unit for any experience or any age range. I think even if you're a seasoned pro, you could get some good use out of this. It's a multi-process welder that does gasless MIG, gas MIG, lift TIG, stick, and you can put on an aluminum spool gun or change out your liner and make it a dedicated aluminum welder. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and go check out Yes Welder's products because they are a great company and they make some really good machines.